Thank you all for joining us for this webinar on choosing the right entity for your business goals. We would like to thank Vermont Law School, as this is a partnership between them and us here at CVOEO at Financial Futures. We'll go over to the next slide and just go over some quick housekeeping rules before we get started. As you know, this will be recorded so that folks down the line can access it on their own time. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking and throw all questions that you have in the chat. Simeon and I will be monitoring the chat and making sure that everyone's questions are answered in a timely manner. After the workshop, we'll send you this presentation as well as other contact information and resources that we see fit. And I'd like to pass it off to my colleague, Simeon Geigel.
Janet, if you could advance the slide for me, that'd be great. So thank you. So welcome everybody. I'm so pleased that you could join us today for today's webinar. I'm really looking forward to learning just as much as you are. Before we get started, I'd just like to give you a little bit of information about the Micro Business Development Program. The Micro Business Development Program has been around since about 1988. It is a statewide program, and we work with low to moderate income Vermonters to help them start or expand a business. There are no fees for our services as long as folks are income eligible. And if you'd like to learn if you're income eligible and take advantage of our business counseling, please feel free to do so. You can contact myself or my coworker Pacific Sangayuva, who's also on today's class, as well as my coworker John Gergley. Their contact information is below, but they will also be included in the information that Sophia will send out after the class. Jeanette, if you could advance the slide. As I mentioned, microbusiness is a statewide program. There's a total of 5 micro businesses around the state, and each micro business is part of a larger organization called the Community Action Program. And as a result of their connection with those programs, they oversee a certain territory. And you can see below the different micro business organizations and the counties they serve. Brock covers Bennington, Rutland, Capstone, Washington, Lamoille, East and West Orange counties, CVOEO, Addison, Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle, NECA, Caledonia, Essex, and Orleans, and SEVCA covers Windham and Windsor. So those are the contact people that cover those specific areas if you're looking to get business counseling from those folks if you live in those areas. And that information will also be included in the email that Sophia will send out after the class. And finally, below that, you can see our general website where you can get more information about our program and further identify the folks that are mentioned here. Great, Jeanette. So I do like to take the opportunity to mention that there are other business support services in our area. Of course, our focus is Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle counties, and these organizations cover those areas as well as areas outside of our coverage. You can see here that we've got Burlington's Business and Workforce Development that's specific to folks who are looking to start or expand a business in Burlington, Center for Women in Enterprise, Mercy Connections Women's Small Business Program, the SBDC, Vermont Small Business Development Center, Small Business Administration, and finally Champlain Valley SCORE. And this information will also be included in the email that will be sent out after the class. Jeanette? Thank you. Before we jump into things, I would like to introduce and show my appreciation for Jeanette Eakes and Oliver Goodenough for agreeing to attend today and provide us with this really invaluable information. Jeanette is a professor of law at the Vermont Law School and Graduate School. And Oliver Goodenough is also a professor of law at the Vermont Law School and Graduate School. He's also on the faculty of Stanford and Dartmouth, and he's a founding member of Scopus. And he was explaining to me earlier that he has many roles there, including a chief compliance officer. So I do really sincerely appreciate you being on today's class, and I really look forward to learning with everybody else. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much in return. It's great for us to be able to contribute to this conversation on what business entities are and how they might work with your needs and challenges. Before we get going, I'd like to just mention, as we will repeat, we are in this program able to give education. We're not able to give legal advice, and that means that a couple of things. One is that we can't answer questions that you might have specifically about your own circumstance. We can answer questions, provide some background information and educational information that might be useful. Also, please don't tell us things that are confidential about your business in the context of a question. So please don't do that. Again, we are here. We can be your educator. We can't be your lawyer in these circumstances. Hopefully that won't be too frustrating. Professor Reichs, do you have anything you would add?
No, that sounds like a great introduction. The only other piece I'd add is we are representing the Vermont Law and Graduate School Entrepreneurship Legal Laboratory, which was founded for the purpose of supporting small businesses in the state of Vermont with their legal needs.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, today we're going to talk first a bit about the business entities. Actually, that middle line there, what value does a lawyer bring? Choosing an entity, we're going to take to the end of our discussion here. Also, once we're done with our more formal discussion, we're going to have a fair bit of time for question and answer, a kind of office hours, again on an educational basis rather than specific advice. Please, if you have questions, pop them in the chat as we go along. We don't mind being interrupted if that's appropriate. That you want to go on to the next. There we go. All right, this slide is our starting point, and it's a little daunting, and we recognize that it's a little daunting, but perhaps when we come back towards the end, it will be less daunting. One of the reasons we have this here is to show that there are a number of different options for an enterprise, for what to do with your enterprise, whether it's business, nonprofit, somewhere in between. And if you look at that white column down the left, you see that there are sole proprietorships, partnerships, limited liability companies, corporations, co-ops, benefit corporations, nonprofits. There's a somewhat bewildering selection of possibilities. And then you see across the top the ownership, liability, governing, funding, taxes, government requirements. You see then this somewhat even within the bewildering selection, there are these major categories of differences between the various kinds of business organizations. So this is the starting point for your conceptualization, but also it should be the ending point, because we'll hopefully get back to it as once we've worked our way through. But what we're going to try and do is basically take those major categories on the left-hand side that you see and work our way through them in the context of a number of these different criteria. And then hopefully you can see why it is you might make a choice among all of those things. So a bit bewildering. My guess is this is for those of you who don't have much experience with business organizations, this is why you're saying, I don't know if that's good enough help, but hopefully we can help you. So if we take the next slide. All right, there are a number of core possibilities. Sole proprietorship. What is a sole proprietorship? A sole proprietorship is when basically the entrepreneur just owns the business straight up. There's nothing that says they can't do that. You as an entrepreneur can have ownership of things. One of the examples I sometimes give on this is back in the day, early days of our former president Donald Trump's business career. He sometimes just had a building that was just owned by Donald Trump, and it took one of his the first bankruptcies of his organizations for him to learn that lesson, as we'll say, that he ought to have a number of different companies in place. And my understanding is currently there are hundreds of Trump organization LLCs, corporations, etc. So perhaps that lesson has been learned overly well. But sole proprietorship, we'll come back to some of the attributes of that. Basically, it is the owner just acting directly. If two or more people come together just to act directly, that forms a partnership. And a partnership is the next on our list here. And a partnership is just that, two or more people coming together to be co-owners of a business for profit. That's the basic definition. And as we'll see as we go forward, the partnership has some pluses, but it also has minuses, a principal one being the liability question that happens here. Because as I mentioned with Trump's bankruptcy problems, if you own your business, just you, if the business has a problem, it's just you who has the problem as well. If there's liability connected with the business, it passes straight through to the owner. That's also true with partnerships, where the classic partnership passes the liability through to its owners. So we'll come to that in more detail. By the way, if someone doesn't file any of the establishing documents for any of these more developed and sort of specialized business forms that we're going to be looking at, and it's two or more people coming together, the law just by default makes it a partnership. That's what it is, and with all of its difficulties going forward. So it's a good reason to take care and time, and if a different entity form is appropriate, to take the time to make that properly established. Next up on our hierarchy is the limited liability company, the LLC. And the LLC is something that many people are opting into at this point. Why? Because it allows you to have the benefits of being a sole proprietor or a partnership, while putting in place a liability shield, at least a partial net liability shield between the owners and the liabilities of the enterprise. That's why it's an LLC, a limited liability company. There are two major flavors of this. One is member managed, and member managed is when an LLC is directly managed by the people who are its members. In an LLC, you don't call them partners, you call them members. And the members are directly engaged in the management. A manager-managed LLC has a more centralized structure where typically one or more managers are appointed. The members may take part, but basically the day-to-day and all is set in the hands of specified managers who will run the company on behalf of the other members. So that's the two major flavors of an LLC: participatory member managed, a centralized manager managed. Have the next slide.
And before we leave this slide, I'd add that most businesses start or go through a process in which they are in these categories in the state of Vermont.
Yes, because these categories are the sort of less formal categories. These are what happens if it's small groups. Even if one is going to have take the step of forming a explicit business enterprise like an LLC, the rules are fairly informal. We'll again review that as we go forward. But the classic corporation is typically reserved for more formal business enterprises, and particularly those that want to raise capital on a more formal basis than is the case with a classic LLC. That leads us to the next flavor of business organizations, which is the corporation. And the corporation is a creature of the state. That to incorporate means to embody in Latin, basically. So it creates a new fictive person. And that new fictive person, actually, just one moment here. That new fictive person is the corporation. And the corporation was set up to be something that had a lot of members. It has shareholders instead of members. You can have a lot of participants, boards of directors, basically to centralize the management, officers, presidents, CEOs, treasurers, vice presidents, all of that kind of thing. It's a structure that is particularly well suited to enterprises with a lot of shareholders, to enterprises with a fair number of employees. Again, as Professor Ives was saying, many smaller businesses in Vermont would opt into an LLC rather than into a corporation, because corporation really is meant for larger companies that particularly larger companies that are planning to opt into a kind of classic funding strategy like having many shareholders or having funding through something like a venture capital or private equity, where this kind of thing might be more expected. All right, those are the major groupings. There are then two specialized types of enterprise. There's the cooperative, and the cooperative is has a separate law, separate from the corporation to set it up. Cooperatives can be consumer oriented, they can be producer oriented, they can be worker oriented, they can be, in all those different kinds of ways. The core principle of the cooperative is that basically it's kind of like a super partnership where people come together to work together towards a common goal of some kind. And that it's not going to be owned by an owner, but is instead going to be owned by its members and participants. Again, a different law for that. It looks a lot like a corporation in some ways, but has this difference of being, instead of being owned by investors or by founders and managers, it's owned by its participants, essentially. Then there's the benefit corporation. The benefit corporation is a subset of regular corporations, which is a corporation that is set up to provide a public benefit, not just to be owned by people for profit, but to explicitly have a public benefit of some kind. So it's not quite a charity, it's not quite a nonprofit, because nonprofits basically are set up so that they won't benefit individuals. Here, the individual owners can take benefit, they can take a salary, they can take profits, etc. But while that's going on, there needs to be also a goal for a public benefit as well. Work on something that will benefit the environment, or work on something that will benefit a particular community. That kind of thing is what the benefit corporation is really set up to do. And then finally is essentially the nonprofit. And the not-for-profit is often done through a corporation, a public benefit corporation. This is a circumstance where the nonprofit can't really be set up to inure to the benefit of private individuals. Yes, the managers can take a reasonable salary and things like that, but if the enterprise makes a big profit, the profit has to go back into the public benefit of the enterprise and not to any private pockets. So that can be a useful form for some purposes, but it is also limited in that way that it has to be essentially limited to the public good in some fashion. Okay, that's the overview. And before we go into a deeper dive, are there any questions on that kind of overview level? Any questions? No, we're good. Okay. How can an identity help you to achieve your business goals? Now, here's where we think about those goals that are reflected in the issues across the top of that matrix that we saw earlier, because in deciding across this smorgasbord, one of the real question is what best suits the goals of the business people and the business itself as it gets going. And there are a number of different goals that occur. Yes, please feel free to post your questions. Thank you. It would be great if there are questions. One key element for many people is liability protection. Now, some businesses are so benign that they're very unlikely to have liability. I have a business in which I write things sometimes for some money and do some bits and pieces about academic consulting. And I've never bothered to make any kind of business entity for that. Why? Partly because it's just the liability is so unlikely in that context. What are they going to do? Sue me because they don't like my book? Isn't likely to happen. So and as the author, I would be the author anyway. So I haven't opted into anything more formal, but for anything with a lot of operations, typically there are liability concerns that may come up. If it's a construction service, are there liability from problems with what's being built? If it's a medical providing a medical or therapeutic services, or would the disgruntled patient or customer choose to sue? So liability protection is a piece of this. Also, another piece is how do we structure it so that the tax circumstances is as favorable as we can make it for the individuals involved. And as we'll see that there are tax savings that can come from a variety of different ways. Who's going to invest? Is investment the way that the money is going to be raised? Or what's their deal? Is it a kind of they become members in an LLC or shareholders in a corporation or members in a cooperative? What is that? Or is it going to be donation based? Is it going to be grants and donations? In which case, then maybe a nonprofit is the best circumstance, where we're not looking for a vehicle that would allow the sharing of money. Legitimacy and structure. Again, there's a certain legitimacy that comes with setting up a business organization, whether it's an LLC or a corporation or one of the others. That you when an entrepreneur goes into a bank and says, by the way, this is the corporation, this is what we're doing, or this is the LLC, this is what we're doing. There's a kind of a legitimacy that comes from that. Also, if there are a number of different governance structures that are there, if the entrepreneurs more than one of them and have investors and all this, who's going to make what decisions when? Think back again to the fact that it could be a member managed, in which case everybody's going to be involved, manager managed, and then just the central managers are going to be involved in most day-to-day decision making. Is it going to be more like a corporation with a board of directors? What is that governance structure, and how does that fit the goals of the entrepreneur and the investors? The entrepreneur may be saying, hey, I want to control everything. The investors may be saying, hey, we want to be part of that decision-making process. Again, what is that structure? What are the goals? Communicating the mission can also be a piece of this. If the mission really is to benefit society, maybe being a benefit corporation is a good idea. That will signal to people that there's a commission, that there's a commitment rather to doing that kind of good behavior. And finally, legacy planning. Ooh, this is already thinking ahead, not just to the immediate question of what is the business organization, but what does it want to look like when I surrender that organization, when I surrender it perhaps to my children or other heirs, if I want to do it at my death, or perhaps I want to retire. Do I sell it out to my employees? Do I have other members or managers who will step in and take over? So all of these are the kinds of things that need to be thought of. Boy, this just got complicated in a hurry, right? We've got a long list of possible subjects. We've got a big list of possible goals. What do we do about that? Well, we're going to educate you a bit more, and then we're also going to suggest that talking to a lawyer about it isn't a bad thing. But hopefully, if you do talk to a lawyer about this, if you use this kind of criteria and education we're sharing with you to think about some things in advance, the questions the lawyer is going to ask will make better sense. And a good lawyer will in fact ask questions like these to say, what are your goals? What are you planning to do? And then we'll help shape the appropriate business entity for the purpose. Okay, next slide. Did we just skip one? This one is just yes, okay. So the first one of the things we looked at was these questions of liability, and we've talked about that already a little bit. Again, the business when it operates typically has some liability potential, maybe negligible, like my writing, hopefully, or it could be substantial, like a construction company or a medical services company, or imagine almost anything that involves getting in a car and driving someplace has potential liability. And once one starts dealing with the general public, whether it's in a storefront or through a catering service, all of these are things that potentially create some liability for people. Now, as mentioned, in a sole proprietorship, there's no separation. So if the business is liable, the individual is liable. And the individual can be liable both for the individual owner's own actions. That's the person driving the car when it runs into the school bus, in which case there's individual liability, but there's also vicarious liability. An employee drives the car and runs into the school bus. That kind of vicarious liability, because of an employee doing something, may or may not actually implicate the owner. If the owner said, drive too fast, then they might be liable as well. But often there's this vicarious liability didn't involve misconduct by the owner, just was, hey, it just happened. And to have something with a limited liability shield, as we call it, in place can be very useful. What that shield basically says is the company may be liable, but the owners of the company aren't necessarily liable unless there's some fault of their own that would cause that. So in a sole proprietorship, no such separation, no shield. Just the sole proprietor is on the hook if the business is on the hook. Secondly, general partnership. Similar kind of problem here, because in a classic general partnership, there's no separation. All of the partners are on the hook. And again, that, as we mentioned, is the default for 2 or more people doing business together if they don't file anything else. So both of those sort of default one person and multiple people status has this potential for great liability. That's one of the reasons people often choose to have something more formal that will help prevent that. As we mentioned, the limited liability company, the corporation, the benefit corporation, all of these have that kind of shield that goes into place between the owners and the liability of the enterprise. The separation, as it says here, is imperfect. Why? Partly because the owner can breach the separation if the owner is at fault in some way, or if the owner has consented to guarantee. Sometimes lenders to small business say, "Oh, and by the way, we want that personal guarantee." Well, guess what? When that's provided, then the person is on the hook. For not because they're an owner, but because they agreed, and that would create a liability. By the way, sometimes that's necessary. I don't know if any of you have experienced, you go to a bank and say, "Hey, lend money to my LLC," and they say, "That's cool. How about you co-sign, and then we'll talk about it." If that's a requirement, then a decision just has to be made about whether that's a good idea or not. Another thing that makes the separation imperfect is the fact that typically these companies need to have formalities. They need to meet the government requirements. They need to people need to have separate bank accounts, have meetings when they're supposed to, do the things that keep the formal life of the company going. LLC, by the way, has rather less of those than a corporation. Corporation has somewhat more. One of the reasons why LLC is popular is that it has rather less formality. But that said, as a judge once said, in a case like this, said, if the business owners can't be bothered to keep things separate, why should we? So again, there's a duty on the business owners to have the separate bank accounts, to have the separate employees, to have the separate tax filing, do the formalities that follow in that place. Many of these business entities, there's an annual report. The corporations have boards. They need a board meeting, etc. There are just, again, these formalities that need to go forward. You would go next slide. All right, so liability was the first set of goals. Tax structure. As you can see, we've got highlighted here. Talk to an accountant or an attorney who's knowledgeable in the tax world, because the tax gets tricky quickly, and it's often very fact specific and number specifics on what to do. So the LLC, like the partnership, is often a pass-through. How do you have a board meeting if you are a one-person LLC? Well, luckily, LLCs typically don't have a requirement for a board meeting. Often you can actually have a board meeting. There can be single director companies sometimes, in which case, how do you have that board meeting? And the answer to that is typically it's done instead through an action in writing of some kind, where the action is taken through a written action rather than through a meeting. I have seen people have a meeting with themselves and have minutes. At this meeting, I've decided to hire some people, and here's what he decided. In some ways, minutes are just a recordation of a set of decisions taken at the board, and there's only one person taking those decisions. We can do it that way. But
most people are more comfortable with a writing and not a meeting where they're talking to themselves and taking their own minutes.
Exactly. So
just because you feel less silly.
Typically, it's done these days as an action in writing. That's a much better way to have it done. Exactly.
Do you have to do that if you're an LLC?
The LLC, it is a good idea to record major decisions. It's just part of that formality piece. And so we know, even if it's a sole member and they're making up their own mind and everything, just even if once a year they sit down and say, "Hey, I'm going to record, these are the actions we took, and they had my approval." That kind of formality is not a bad thing to do. It's not fully necessary in LLC, but it's not a bad thing to do.
The members should meet. They should talk.
Well,
should communicate about the business.
If they're more than one, absolutely, then they should meet.
Exactly.
And whatever formal steps. So if a bank loan is gotten, often the bank will require that the members, if there's more than one, would have a written confirmation of approval of this by the members.
Yes, that makes sense. But I was also in my own mind thinking that if you're just a single member LLC, like how you.
Then what you sometimes will do is have a confirmation of sole members saying, "Yeah, this is an action, an authorized action of the LLC.
I like to think about it as documenting your actions.
There you go, exactly.
When you're a sole member LLC, much in the same way you'd say, this is why I did this, and here is my note so I can look back on it and remember why I did things. In a single member LLC, you'd have the same sort of process, but it becomes it has more legal weight. It feels more like a formality.
In the company that I'm involved with, we have a sole member LLC as a subsidiary of the company, and again, that's what we do when we want to appoint somebody to an office or elect a tax status or something along that line. That kind of memorializing action is a good thing to have. So it doesn't have to be a meeting with yourself, but it should be at least memorialized as an action of yourself. Okay. Tax structures. There are two major flavors of tax, of the income tax level for companies and enterprises. There's the pass-through taxation. And pass-through taxation basically says for income taxes, it's the entity isn't going to be looked at. It's going to be basically having to just pass it through to the owners. In a sole sole member LLC, that would the sole member the LLC is typically a disregarded entity for tax purposes, and the tax stuff goes straight on the 1040 of the owner. I believe it's Schedule C of reporting income on as an owner of a business. And if it's a partnership, a classic partnership, or in this case also an LLC electing to be taxed as a partnership, because the LLC gets to choose, like to be taxed as a partnership, then it would typically then be just divided up among the members according to their membership interests, and that would then be passed through to them to be again put on their Schedule C's as income from a partnership or enterprise like that. But an LLC or a partnership, but not a sole member LLC, but not a sole proprietorship, can also elect to be taxed as an S corp, and we'll get to that in a moment. We'll come back around, because a corporation, by contrast, is viewed as its own taxpayer for income taxes. And essentially, it then, if a classic corporation, what's called a C corp, would then file for its taxes separately, pay some taxes, and then if any dividends are handed out to its owners, those dividends would be then taxed at the ownership level. This used to be a fairly significant double taxation, but some of the more recent laws diminishing the level of taxation on dividends, among other things, have cut back on that kind of thing. So it's still something to talk to your accountant about, but it's not typically as severe as it once was. So there's that double taxation. But a corporation can also elect, if it qualifies, and again that's a big if it qualifies, to be what's called an S corp. And an S corp it has pass-through taxation like a partnership. Again, it's not that double piece; it just goes straight up. The S corp taxation is you have to qualify. There's a limited number of members or shareholders who can be that. There has to be one class of stock. All the participants have to be either U.S. taxpayer, individual taxpayers, or individual either as citizens or as permanent residents, so that we don't escape that taxation. There's a whole set of hoops to jump through with an S corp. Why wouldn't someone do it? Well, it turns out that there's a moderate tax benefit for an S corp with a limited number of owners who are taking most of the money out themselves, because there are if it's a classic partnership pass-through, you can't count the partner as an employee. If it's a classic, if it's an S corp, you can do that up to a point. Well, why is that good? Because the company can pay some of the FICA and FUTA on a that's the Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid payments from corporate resources rather than from personal things. So there's some savings that can be had in that kind of a context. There are also some other potential savings from the deductibility of the income to the participant. Anyway, it gets pretty technical. Talk to an accountant. This is if one is setting this up, talking to an accountant. And one of the things to ask is say, hey, would it make sense even if I'm an LLC, to be taxed as an S corp. There may be some savings in that case. Professor X, I believe you have experience with this yourself from some years back. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Okay, so again, she's a poster person for why it can be beneficial. Again, the savings aren't huge, but they can be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year. That's not to be sneezed at, particularly in a small business.
And in a small business, particularly if you're not putting a lot into profits that go in shares out to different members of your LLC, and it's just flowing back to you, it's yet another way that there's an offset in taxes. And frankly, this is where the accountant comes in handy. They run the numbers for you and help you make that decision.
Exactly. So lesson on taxes is be aware of these different approaches, but also be aware that you may want to run the numbers with an account. Next slide, please. And I don't see any questions yet on this tax topic. People are often numbed to it, but hopefully that's enough for you to at least ask intelligent questions going forward. Debt investment and donations. Okay, for-profit companies may open up capital options to allow for future growth. Where does the money come from? Money can come from loans, in which case the lender is typically not a participant in the ownership of the company. It is not a member of an LLC, a partner in a partnership, or a shareholder in the corporation. There can be small business grants, various small business grants around. Those are great. Those also typically don't involve the grantor becoming a shareholder of some kind. Or it can be we can take money in return for an equity interest, selling shares in this corporation, selling membership interest if it's an LLC. Sometimes those people can come in on the same basis as the entrepreneur or the founder, in which case common stock in a corporation or a full membership interest. Sometimes there are different classes of membership interest. Remember, in a manager-run thing, maybe the investors are just members, they're not managers. We can also see different classes of stock in a corporation. And angel investing or venture capital have their own typical structures. Often they'll want to see particularly venture capital will want to see it organized as a corporation, as we mentioned previously, with shareholders. There's a whole way of getting venture capital money in what's called sometimes Series A financing, which has a set of expectations about it. Again, quite complex. Talk to a lawyer. Before that, even if it's a corporation, there's something called a SAFE, an SAFE, put out by Y Combinator. And the SAFE can be a very useful way for early investment. Why? Because it basically says we're not going to worry about too much about what the investment is now. Basically, when there is a formal round, a formal issuance of shares, we'll piggyback on whatever they get, and maybe we'll get a discount. Maybe we'll get a little cap that will provide us with an extra benefit when that happens. But we'll wait till that time comes, and then we'll go for it. So an angel level might be in a SAFE. A SAFE is something called in part of a convertible. Sometimes it's also called a convertible note. Would be another way of doing it. So those convertibles, whether it's a SAFE or a note, is sometimes used in that context. Okay, other questions? Before I dive into nonprofits, I just should ask other questions on any of this. I see in the chat there is more in the chat.
A couple of questions occurred to me, if I could throw them out to you.
Sure, please.
Great. So I'm curious if someone's operating an LLC and they invest their own money into getting it started or over the course of time, how do they, one, document that? And two, how do they go about repaying themselves and documenting the repayment?
Okay, again, this is one of those things where having some documentation would be very, very useful. The contribution from one's own money to an LLC that person has typically will take either the form of a capital contribution, in which case it is being essentially invested in the LLC as if it were an investor making that, or it can be loaned to the LLC by the individual. The purposes of that are either one works, but again, it's good to talk to an accountant in that context, really, to say which would be more suitable for my circumstances and the circumstances of the company. I often like to start with loans. Why? Because they can always be converted into a capital contribution just by saying, hey, okay, it's capital. It's much harder to do the other way around. But again, that won't work for everybody. So talking to the accountant on that. That documentation was a loan. How about a loan of some kind? If it's a capital contribution, again, some kind of documentation. Put in a file. Put it in the notebook. Put it in the saved file on the machine. Whatever it is that is there. Having that in a PDF or even a signed physical form just keeps track of things. If people know how much they put in. If there's a loss, they know how much loss they can take. There's a whole set of reasons to do that. Would be great. So yes, your question was a very good one. I think one of our lessons is even if it's just a sole member LLC, keeping some records is a very important and useful thing to do on major events like an investment or hiring people or things like that.
And so over the course of time, when the business can afford to do so and they start to repay themselves, how would they go about documenting that repayment?
Again, if it's a loan, what they would do is that they would say, hey, I'm repaying some of the loan, and would document a payment on the loan. If it's a capital contribution that comes back out, the distribution to the owner should also be documented as that, both authorized and documented. So just say, hey, we, if it's more than one, hereby approve the distribution from the capital of the LLC in the amount of X going to whoever it's going to.
And most good accountants are going to want to see documentation of that when they go to file your tax returns at the end of the year. So you're going to be creating that documentation for the IRS anyway.
Okay. And in terms of the documentation, again, if you're just a single member LLC, is it just simply writing it down, the amount, the date, and that's it? Or
again, I don't want to get too deeply into specific advice, but typically, yes, something along the line of it needs to be adequately recorded so that some third party looking at it goes, oh, I know what they did.
Okay.
I mean, that's the test. Is it should be if they went up to somebody in the street and said, hey, well, take a look at this piece of paper. What did I just do? That a smart person on the street should be able to say, oh, you just distributed X amount of money to yourself. That's kind of the test.
Okay, thank you.
All
Pacific,
right.
you have your hand up. You have a question, Pacific?
Yeah, yes, I do have a question. How about if someone is so in case someone already started the business, they have bank accounts, and they already have a business check. Can they write themselves a check from the business account and consider that as a record?
It is a very bad idea to use the company's account to pay personal expenses. You see what I'm saying? Because that confuses that line between the two. But with appropriate documentation, if it is appropriate repayment or appropriate sharing of revenue, if it's a sole proprietorship or appropriate sharing of revenue, if it's a company, either a loan repayment or a distribution, like we said, document why it's happening with some kind of authorization, and B, write the check. That kind of thing is appropriate. Again, what isn't appropriate is just to use the company's money as a piggy bank for going out to dinner or buying groceries or making a car payment or whatever it is. That is what should not be done.
And in most cases, you're going to want to do more than just write a check for repayment of capital or a loan from the business to the owner. You're going to want to document it in writing some way.
Exactly. Put that in the file, like we said earlier, something that says, I have authorized from the LLC to pay me this amount to constitute a loan repayment, to constitute a distribution from the LLC. Again, at a level that somebody who didn't know about it could understand what you did and why. And if that can even reference a check number, cool. I mean, and the more specific that something like can be, typically the better, because more documentation is useful generally rather than less. Okay. Good question. Nonprofits. Let me move on to nonprofits. Nonprofits getting debt investment donations. Nonprofits are typically, as we mentioned earlier, if there's money coming from a grant, coming from a public or another nonprofit or something like that, often they will want to have the other side will want it set up as a nonprofit so that it doesn't so that the public purpose is there. It doesn't inure to a private benefit of some kind. Traditionally, the nonprofits will try and meet what's called the 501c3 test, which is charitable, religious, or educational purposes. They're typically you're going to have a board in a not-for-profit corporation. Typically, you'd have a separate executive director from the board, although that sometimes those lines can be blurred. What this does by shifting the funding model to a charitable or grant-based basis is sometimes this can make what would otherwise be an unprofitable business into something that can be self-sustaining, because the grants, etc., will fill in for what the business itself does. So it's worth keeping in mind always the possibility, but it does have those limitations of no private benefit, etc.
And sometimes when there's a public purpose, the way that nonprofit is sustained is through public money. And in those cases, it requires being a nonprofit for that to work right.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there are times when that could be an appropriate vehicle for what I call enterprise, which is the sort of broader notion of, hey, I'm doing stuff. How do I organize doing stuff? And doing stuff can include a business, and it can include a nonprofit. Okay, next slide. Legitimacy and structure. Again, how are we going to do this? How are we going to structure the governance? How are we going to structure its legitimacy? Some grant and investors will want there to be a board, and they may even want to be a member of the board. That's a negotiable point. If one raises money from a venture capitalist, for instance, the VC firm is going to have one or two members on the board of the company. Grant and loan options are it says unavailable without at least an LLC. I'm not sure that's fully true, but it's good to have something a little more formal in place. That typically gives some comfort to the lenders or the grant makers. Again, says some benefits from having a business benefit from having structure rules to ensure smooth operations. I would say most actually do. That if it's going to be more than just one person, the structure is good. Remember that the folks that one is dealing with now are friends and colleagues. They may not always be friends and colleagues. There's nothing that makes worse enemies than a business disagreement that can't be resolved. Secondly, today's friend or colleague, a business partner, or a member in the LLC, everybody's mortal. You may be dealing with spouses or children or who knows what next when we have that kind of a structure. So taking a little time to build an operating agreement, if it's an LLC, or a shareholders agreement if it's a smaller corporation, or bylaws and governance structures that work if it's a bigger corporation, all of that tends to repay. It's important to have those governance documents of some kind. And bare bones starting out, that anything almost is better than nothing. And frankly, you won't miss this until there's friction. And as soon as there's friction, you'll say, why didn't we? Don't have that moment. Ounce of prevention's worth a pint of cure, little Benjamin Franklin here. Yeah. Just do it. And because when everybody's mad at each other is the time you can't agree to it now. What we wanted to have is an agreed procedure for buying somebody out earlier when everybody was happy with each other and thought the procedure would be fair and equal. So remember the 7 Ds, death, divorce, addiction, disease, debt, dispute. All of these are different things that can cause difficulty. And these things happen. These things happen. And if one is anticipating them a bit, that's one of the reasons you pay lawyers. Is lawyers typically are pretty good at anticipating. You may not want to have to think about it. They will. Let them help you guide so if life happens to you, there's a preparation. Lawyers are great at thinking of all the horrible things that could happen to you and helping you protect against it. One of the reasons we're so popular with people is we say, hey, we thought about what happens if you become a drug addict. I don't know about it. Yeah, I mean, people don't want to think about that. All right. So anyway, that the structure and legitimacy is very useful in that context. Next platform. Communicating your mission. Again, choosing an entity can reflect your values to help distinguish a business in a competitive market. This is an advertisement for the benefit corporation structure. There's a certification that can come through the B Corp. A B Corp is an organization that will certify you as a having a public purpose of some kind. The benefit corporation or the mutual benefit corporation can be a form of a corporation that allows that to go in as a legal starting point. Cooperatives also is another way to signal the fact that you are in this for everybody's benefit. A worker-owned cooperative can be something along that line. By the way, there's a great resources if you want to explore employee ownership at VEOC.org. They are a great resource in Vermont for employee-owned styles of setting up a company. Okay, any questions? Move on to the next slide. And then the last thing, this is planning your legacy. Again, we've talked a little bit about this, how you're going to pass it to the next generation or wherever you want to pass it on to. The challenge is that the buyer typically doesn't have the capital to buy it outright. I mean, it's offspring, it's children. I know they don't typically have a lot of money to buy it out. Seller can't afford to give the business away during their lifetime. If they're going to retire the money from the sale would be their way to pay for it. One of the ways you can do it is sometimes make the entity a slow transition. If a business entity, sometimes one can pass on a membership in an LLC or some shares over time. We avoid some taxes, have a transition. But again, I don't necessarily want my kids running the business yet, so I may want to set up that two-tiered structure where what they're getting is one, as long as I'm involved, that they're getting is non-managing shares or membership interests. There we go. It can have a transitional steps in management. Again, it's something to think about doing this. Youngish entrepreneurs probably aren't thinking much about this, but I'm thinking early, making it possible, maybe a sensible thing to do even so. So how do you also dividing the shares of a business entity to pass on to your inheritance? Again, this is a trust in the state's lawyer kind of thing. Get the business succession plan and the how it's actually going to go through the will synced up. Means there isn't problems going forward. Next slide.
So how can a lawyer help you choose your business entity, right? So obviously, in all of these things we've been talking about already today, there's a lot of opportunities to make informed choices. One of the reasons we've gone over everything so granularly today is so you come to a lawyer with all of these ideas and you have thought about these things in advance. So in order to make informed choices, you have a piece you bring to the conversation, but the lawyer is going to help guide you, given your particular set of circumstances, in how to make the best choices for you, whether you have certain future growth plans, you have certain transition plans, what your plans are for now, how they relate to later. We were just talking about legacy. Not only does your estate plan have to work with the LLC's estate plan, but all the other members too. So there's a lot of complications involved in making all of those things run smoothly so that we're not creating unreasonable or strange expectations for heirs.
Imagine a little bit like instead of building a business, you're building a house. And if you're building a house, you want to think about how many bedrooms we're going to need. Well, it's only me and my spouse at the moment, but we may have some kids, in which case I have to have some extra rooms. Where's the plumbing going to go? How many bathrooms? What kitchen? All electrical. All of those are things that would need to be sort of worked out in advance, so that as the owner grows into the house, there isn't something. Gee, I wish I'd done that differently. Same idea of growing into a business that you want to be able to imagine, how many bathrooms does this business need going forward? Obviously, a bit of a mixed metaphor, but it's that same kind of thought.
It's a great metaphor, because we all know what happens when you don't make those plans, right? You end up with the Vermont farmhouse that has a room stuck on here and a room stuck on here. And for some reason, you have to walk through the bathroom that everyone uses to get to somebody's kitchen or their bedroom or something else. And it's not well planned and well thought out. And the house doesn't flow. And frankly, they're very cobbled together, right? And at a certain point, you wish you could bulldoze it and start over again. Yeah, you really don't want to do that with the business. So that's why this future planning and thoughtful consideration is so important.
And the same way that an architect can help you with that planning process by asking you questions you wouldn't have thought of, and then figuring out some solutions. Talking to a lawyer is sort of the same thing. They can help figure out the questions that you weren't asking yourself, the answers that you should have to them, and then how you implement that through one of these business structures in a legally recognized and enforceable way.
All right. What parts should have a lawyer? Obviously, we've just talked about the structure. So talk to a lawyer about the structure. The lawyer can advise you on what choices to make for your structure when you're planning it out. They can advise you on your operating agreement and the bylaws. So when you're writing your operating agreement out, fine, take something in. If you've got an outline of the things you want to think about and talk about, take that in. Any homework you do in advance of talking to the attorney, and by homework, I mean thoughtfully thinking about what you want. What are the pros and cons? It's best to think those things through a little bit before you go to the lawyer, especially in a member LLC where you've got a couple of different parties involved. Talk about it first. Don't get to a lawyer who you're paying by the hour and decide to quibble over one detail, right? The lawyer will sit there and listen to you quibble for 2 hours. However, that's not a real great expenditure of your money. So think those things through and try to come to some base level agreements in advance. The lawyer can write it, or the lawyer can review it. Folks always ask me, what about LegalZoom? LegalZoom will do it. And my response is, yes, LegalZoom will do it, but maybe not at the level you want it done. So maybe you start with LegalZoom and you add some things and you take some things away, and then you go to a lawyer and you say, can you look over this document with me and go over it? I think it considers most of what I want to do, but I'd like you to take a look at it. So lawyers can act as a reviewer, lawyers can act as an instigator, they can be part of your team, and they can play all of these different roles. So have in mind when you go to your attorney what you really want in that relationship and experience. And then for the financial side of this, involve a lawyer, involve an accountant. It is in your best interest. Lawyers can write, review, and in that deal, they can also watch your back. One of the things when you hire a lawyer, they're on your side. And they're there to support you, to help you, and to make sure that no one else is taking advantage of you in any way, right? Do you have anything to add to that, Professor Goodenough?
Well, there was that old commercial for I think it was one of the General Motors mechanics who had said, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. There's some truth to that in terms of lawyering as well, you don't want to, obviously any money you can save is great, but on the other hand, if it leads to mistakes getting made, that's a problem.
And paying now and hiring a lawyer in advance can sometimes avoid even litigation in the future. And litigation is expensive. You don't want to do that. Avoid it if you can. Simeon, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. This might be a little bit more basic than what you're talking about, but are there any thoughts or ideas or suggestions you can make to people that would help them when they are looking for a lawyer? Like what kinds of things should you be asking to make sure maybe that you're a good fit or something along those lines?
You should interview more than one lawyer. The lawyer should be part of your team. So you're going to have an accountant, and hopefully you have an accountant you work with well that you go back to year after year so that they can become accustomed to your business, what you do, how you do it, etc. In that same way, you want to work with a lawyer who can become accustomed to you, to your business and what you do and how you do it. So when you're speaking to a lawyer, you want to ask them whether they're willing to work with you on something, whether they're willing to let you write it and review it if that's how you want to proceed. If you want to turn it all over to them, then you need to make that clear and say, what I really want to do is have you tell me what I should be doing here. They're still going to make you make the decisions, but they're going to take it as far as they can, right? And there's differing levels of involvement. They can just do, for example, the operating agreement. And you go and file at the Secretary of State and file a DBA, doing business as form, right? So there's lots of different ways this can be done and handled. You need to go in, talk to the attorney, and work out a way that you do business together. And this is a collaborative effort. This is not one-sided. It shouldn't be one-sided. If it is one-sided, something's not right in the relationship. How much effort is on each side? That's going to end up about how much you want to pay the lawyer, right? And what the lawyer's willing to do. Some lawyers really want to do it all, and that's how they do business. maybe that's not the right fit for you if you want to do more of it and be more involved in some of the writing or some of the other things. If you want to write your contracts and just have an attorney review them, then maybe you need an attorney that's willing to do that, right? You don't want to find out after you go to all the trouble of creating a relationship for the entity formation and for your operating agreement to find out that, yeah, no, they don't want to work that way when it gets to contracts. So interview them.
And when choosing a lawyer, it's a little bit like choosing a doctor. You know, if your feet are hurting, you don't want to have a doctor who specializes in ear, nose, and throat. You know, it's just probably not such a good idea. There are some wonderful general practice people here in practice in Vermont. That's often the case. They can be terrific, but I think or a specialist in business law. There are those two folks as well. But I think what one wants to do is make sure that they have some experience in that and some knowledge and specialty in the area you're going. Going to someone who is a
family lawyer.
Hmm?
You probably don't want to go to someone who is a divorce lawyer for starting your business.
Yeah.
Unless they're a divorce lawyer and a business lawyer, and that's what they do, right? So find out about their experience. Ask them if they have some folks that have worked with them before that would be willing to talk to you. Word of mouth is a good way to do this. Talk to other people who are happy with working with this attorney, right? All of those sorts of things that you would normally do to vet any kind of professional service provider that you do. If you hire a contractor or a roofer for your house, you're looking for some positive reviews or recommendations for that person who's going to be roofing your house before they roof it. Because you don't want to get to the summer, spring, and all year long monsoon in Vermont and get to the point where your house is flooding. So those are the things you want to think about when you're talking to a lawyer. You also want to think about how you want to pay. Some lawyers want to do things by the hour. Others want to do things by the job. Some lawyers don't care and will gravitate towards what the client is looking for. If you have a way you prefer to do that, a lot of businesses want to put it in their budget as a set amount. Then you're looking at a well-scoped legal representation that is a specific cost, right? And you need to talk to the attorney first and say, will you do this for X dollars? Can we define what you're going to do and say you will do this and no more than this for X dollars? Most will say yes. There are some that will want to do it by the hour and only by the hour, and maybe then that's not the appropriate relationship for you at this time. There may become a time when you've worked with an attorney, you're very comfortable with them, and all you want them to do is review a contract, and you toss it to them. An hourly rate is fine because you know it's going to take them 15 minutes or a half an hour to look at this. They're different conversations.
And
And you should be aware that conversation often is then embodied in an engagement letter with a lawyer. And that engagement letter should say the things that you've discussed with that lawyer, because that's where that goes. And it's perfectly okay to negotiate with a lawyer. It's perfectly okay. If they're not keen on it and it's important to you, then maybe they're not the right one to go for. And one other thing to be aware of is that the word retainer does not mean capped fee. A retainer is just money that has been given as a deposit to the lawyer to help cover the fee, whatever it is. So if someone says, hey, I want a retainer of $2,000 this job, that does not mean that they've just agreed to do it for $2,000. So just be aware that's a frequent mistake people make. A retainer is not the same thing as a cap fee.
And they will bill you once they've used up the retainer. They will send you bills all along, but they will say it's already paid until it uses up all the fund in your retainer. And then once you're past that amount, you will continue to get billed. And you might be like, wait, we're not even halfway done with this project. What happened to my budget? And as a business, you're going to be attentive to your budget because you're going to want to be specific in the amount you spend on legal or whatever aspect of your business it is in a year. So you can balance your budget and actually profit. So it's all about having very direct, very open conversations with the attorney and making sure that you're all on the same page.
Are there alternative ways that you might agree to pay the lawyer?
Absolutely. And in passing, we talked about this a little bit in our conversation before we started the webinar this morning. Vermont will do things in attorneys. Some of them will do things in barter even. or they will give you a discount on your operating agreement with the idea that you're a startup business and you'll be bringing them more business in the future and they believe in your idea too. So attorneys can provide discounts for some services. Attorneys can barter. I've heard of attorneys, taking a year of eggs and fresh milk in exchange for legal services. I've heard them taking half a cow, literally and figuratively, right?
One of my uncles, who is Vermont based, used to pay his attorney in maple syrup, but I'm not sure that you're going to find a lot of attorneys willing to do that. But it's Vermont. We can always have that conversation and see.
And unlike some other places where business occurs, other states, in Manhattan, they would laugh at you a lot.
Mhm.
In Vermont, they won't laugh at you.
Mhm.
It's kind of part of the character of the place. So feel free to ask,
Okay.
and there's no harm in asking.
And in looking for attorneys, I don't know if you're going to cover this, but there are some resources for finding that we can be helpful with you. Do you want to jump to that, or?
Great.
Yeah, let's go.
One other question along those lines, if you're kind of shopping around for an attorney and calling some up, should you, and is it reasonable to ask if they will provide a free consultation?
Yes, absolutely.
It is.
In my experience, many lawyers will say, hey, the first consult, I'm not going to give you advice during the first consult for free because I don't want you to be a lawyer, but come on in, talk about the problem. We'll talk about how we work. We can have that half-hour conversation to see whether you want to be my lawyer. I want to be your lawyer. Or you want to be my client. So yeah, that is frequently, not always, but frequently the case. And if a lawyer insists on charging for that consult, think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. If the interview process where you're just getting to know each other isn't free, then maybe that's not the right choice for you. I would also suggest that you value your attorney's time. A lot of what we've been doing here is offering you learning materials that help you make your questions succinct and make your communications brief. The more you can value your attorney's time, and there's respect on both sides of the table for that, the better relationship you're going to have with your attorney. Oftentimes, estate attorneys have this particularly where there's an older person who is lonely and wants to talk for 2 hours. Sadly, the lawyer has to eat too and ends up charging for those 2 hours. And then what we end up with is this situation of dissatisfaction because the person thought they were talking to a friend. So keep in mind that it's a business relationship.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Can I do it myself? The answer to this is yes, but, and there's a big caveat here. Of course, you can always go to the Secretary of State's website. You can create your own LLC. If they've got a wizard, you click here, click there, put your information in, and poof, you're an LLC. That is not an operating agreement. You have created an LLC, and the state will charge you taxes for that happily. But you have no operating agreement and you have no meeting of the minds. If you're a single person LLC, maybe you need a very short operating agreement and it's not a whole lot. And you can write your little short operating agreement for your single member LLC, take it to an attorney to go over it for a half hour and you're done. Multi-member LLCs, partnerships, et cetera, start getting into a place where we're having those meetings of the minds and having an attorney who can write it all down for you in a legal form is helpful. Some entities, like I said, are DIY friendly, sole proprietorships, obviously, and single member LLCs tend to be. There are lots of tools out there to help you. There's LegalZoom, there's Rocket Lawyer, there's Legal Forms, there's everything under the sun. Your mileage may vary. What you get out of it is oftentimes what you put into it. So if you're paying LegalZoom $250 for an operating agreement, you may be getting a $250 operating agreement, which may not be what you wanted. Lawyers can provide a legal proofread. So maybe you go and you pay $250 to Zoom, and you also pay $250 to a lawyer to proofread the Zoom agreement and go over it and edit it for you, so it says what you think it says. Lawyers can do some, not all. As I said before, they can do bits and pieces, but you have to have an attorney who's willing to work that way. So that's something to talk about in the interview process. in advance. You can be creative in how you pay. You can be creative in how you have a relationship with the attorney, what they do, what you do, etc. And it can change over time. Let's say when you start your business, you've got a lot more time than money. Maybe you do more work. As you advance, maybe you have much less time and a lot more money. You may pay the lawyer. So relationships, like anywhere else, evolve. Do you have anything to add to that, Professor Goodenough? You're muted, my friend.
I was saying no, that's a very good set of points. Thank you.
All right. If you need legal services, there are a lot of ways in which you can get legal services in the state of Vermont. First, we're going to suggest you visit us at vermontlaw.edu /CNPP. That is the Vermont Law and Graduate School Entrepreneurship Legal Laboratory, which as a little future insight, we may be changing the name soon, but the URL will still work. So when you go there and click, you're going to get an intake form, and we will provide legal education to you, similar to what we've done here, but maybe a little more focused on things you want to talk about. If you have questions about contracts or regulations for your business, et cetera, we talk to you about all of that. It's a 45-minute consult to an hour consult. And then we pass you on to an attorney who can help you with whatever your legal needs are. You get 5 to 10 hours of free legal services if you meet the conditions of the grant. Almost everyone in the state of Vermont, because Vermont is a rural state, meets the conditions of the grant. So it's easy for you to get assistance. We try to help BIPOC communities, those that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. We help folks from the LGBTQ plus community. We help folks that are veterans. We help folks that are rural. We help veterans, women-owned businesses. So you name it, we're here to help. And we will try very hard to get you that paid attorney referral. 5 to 10 hours, as I said, of paid attorney services. We have public education events, which you are, of course, free to attend. A lot of those come through the SBA, but they also come through business incubators like Hula or the Rutland Startup or Corey. We're also working with folks, obviously, like the CVOEO and other partners that we have met through the Community Navigator pilot project.
And a number of those have recorded some of the sessions, public sessions we do, so that there are recordings that are available on as this one will be. Great
point. If you go to, for example, the Small Business Development Center, they have a whole series on business bankruptcy and what that's like and how it works. Not that I'm recommending any of you need it, but it's a useful tool. Any questions about this and legal services here?
I've got a question, but I don't want to dominate if somebody wants to go first. Okay, assume not. Just thinking about the educational consult that Vermont Law School provides before somebody is assigned to a lawyer. Is there any kind of paperwork or guidance that they send to kind of get people thinking about how they can maximize that benefit, or what they should be thinking about? Because I'm assuming most people are not going to know what to ask. So is there any kind of
the consult we give is really, it varies. People come in and they tell us one thing in the form that they're interested in learning about contracts, and we end up talking about wastewater removal from the site they want to build on. I mean, and it varies. Generally speaking, we have faculty in the room who can, when we're doing the consult, who can pretty much field anything at a basic educational legal level. If we can't, what we do is we create another opportunity for another educational consult that's with specificity towards the issues that were spotted. A lot of times businesses have trouble spotting legal issues, and we can't spot them unless we have the whole story.
Mhm.
And so having the story from the business when they come to talk to us for that educational consult, sometimes that's the first 10 minutes.
Mhm.
They talk to us about their business. And then we help them find the areas where legal advice and legal expertise can help them build a better business or secure their business or protect it
Mhm.
or close it, right? Or transition away from it or sell it, lots of different aspects there.
Okay, interesting. That's great. Is there an opportunity for people to come back around for another meeting?
There is. We ask that it not be the same type of consult. So if you got a consult on entity formation, the next one should be on something different.
Mm.
There is one hit currently at the 5 to 10 hours of free legal service. Generally speaking, the way the educational consult happens is we help you sort of gather together all of the issues you'd want to bring to an attorney.
Mhm.
And then when we hand you off to the attorney, you're ready to go. And that's the goal. We're saving some time there with the attorney, so we're making the most of those 5 to 10 hours, but we're also getting you in a position where you can have a really great conversation with the lawyer.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Other questions? All right. So this is our contact information. Again, we will certainly put it out there. And anybody who is interested can feel free to reach out to us. And we're happy to hear from you. And I am going to stop sharing so you can actually see our faces and talk to us. And we would be happy to chat with you if you have questions or you have other things you'd like to follow up with.
Jeanette, I'll ask, when somebody goes to the website and fills out the form to request your services, can you give some guidance around what kind of information they should provide?
The questions are pretty specific. We're filling out a federal form that proves that they in fact match the grant conditions we have. So they're going to ask you things like, are you a rural business? Are you a veteran? Are you a woman-owned business? Are you part of the LGBTQ plus community? Are you part of the BIPOC community? So we ask those questions. Filling those in allows you to qualify for the services. So we ask you to please fill them in as honestly as you feel comfortable filling them in. And then we ask things like the name of your business. If you haven't formed a business yet, that's okay. Your name is fine. You can include that too. Email, phone number. And then we ask you what you want to talk about and to tell us a little bit about your business, right? And we go from there.
Great, thank you. Emily, I see that you posted something in the comments section. Would you like to say something or do you have a question?
Sure. I just I'm on this Zoom because I'm really looking to learn more about taxes and legal stuff, but I'm starting my own graphic design business and I thought it was maybe a little bit relevant to people starting their own businesses looking for help, that I can help with graphic design needs if anyone needs it. So I just put my website in there. I hope that was okay and appropriate.
Good to plug, good marketing.
Thanks.
Do you have any
Is
questions?
there any aspect of your questions about tax and entities that we haven't covered that you'd like to get a little more depth on?
I guess so. Do I need to? What kind of specific lawyer should I be looking for, or attorney?
If you go in through the CNPP and you use our website, we will actually take the issues you have and match you with an attorney who's willing to provide the low bono services. And then if you work well with them, you can carry on with them. It's a great try before you buy program, frankly.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I would recommend for anybody who doesn't have a lawyer and is comfortable with it, we match them up. We use the Vermont Bar Association, which is a nonprofit association that helps us find lawyers in the community close to where you live who are willing to work with your type of business and are interested in working with your type of business. So
and again, there's no obligation at all for it. We
absolutely.
Find, people are generally our services are very helpful in getting folks accept.
If you want to do it another way, you can call the bar, and the bar has a lawyer referral line. If you go through the Vermont Bar Lawyer Referral Line, they're required to give you the first half an hour for $25. And sometimes that works well for people. And then word of mouth is a great way to find a lawyer. Talk to other folks that have a lawyer. Folks through this program have come to us with the name of a lawyer and ask if they could apply the $5 to $10. And sure, if the lawyer is willing to work for our low bono rate that we pay them, we're happy to use a lawyer that you choose and put it through the program that way. So we can do this a lot of different ways, and we're flexible and help people as much as we can to meet their needs.
And Jeanette, just to clarify, you said $5 to $10. Did you mean 5 to 10 hours?
Hours, pardon me.
Okay. And just to be exceptionally clear, the 5 to 10 hours that somebody can qualify for an attorney through Vermont Law School, that means that it's free and they don't pay out of pocket for those 5 to 10 hours.
There is no out of pocket for you. And just so you understand, the lawyers in our community are offering to take your project on at what's called a low bono rate. So instead of the $250 or $350 an hour they might make normally, they're willing to do this for $75 an hour to help small businesses get started. So there's a little bit of in-kind giving from the local legal community too that they should be honored for as well.
And they're also hopeful that if it does work, nothing like taking on a good entrepreneur to be at least a hopeful sign for further business as you go forward. Absolutely.
They're as invested in making this relationship work as you are.
That's wonderful. Does anybody else have any questions, lingering thoughts, lingering questions that maybe you've been holding on to? Sounds a good time.
I'm gonna make our student talk, if you don't mind, Simeon.
Sure.
Because we want to make sure he's with us and is as excited about this as we are.
Right.
Stephen, do you have anything you would like to add?
Of course I do, but I'm actually currently in the library, so I can't really talk.
Never discourage your students from being in the library. So Stephen, you've got the world's best excuse.
Absolutely.
I'm going to remember that one, Stephen.
Do you watch us? We all feel back. Ooh, he's in the library. We also know that he's doing one of the hardest things in law school the next 2 weeks. He is doing what's called appellate advocacy. So we wish Stephen all the luck in the world.
That's great. I know I have one or two more questions that occurred to me to ask, and I guess the first one is, maybe the second one is really kind of geared towards people who might be a single member LLCs, and when they're doing business with customers, for all intents and purposes, the customer thinks they're just working with the person that they've come to know that does the service, and they're not really working with an LLC. And so are you able to talk or give examples of how somebody needs to kind of maintain the illusion that they are separate from their business? And
it shouldn't be the illusion, it should be the reality.
Okay, well, even better. But what are some of the practical things people might...
Two or three things.
Yeah.
One of them is make sure that the LLC is clearly on the correspondence, on the website, on any agreement that's reached, that it's all that the LLC with either, preferably its official name. So if it's Green Mountain Catering LLC, that should be on the letterhead, that should be on the website, that should be on the email. It should be in all the places that would be the case, as well as just making sure that it's explained to the client. And secondly, sometimes it's permissible to use a shorthand, what's called a doing business as, a DBA, but it's only acceptable if that DBA is actually officially registered with the Secretary of State's office. And that includes even using the regular name of the company without the LLC or corporate suffix. So if I had Green Mountain Catering and I said Green Mountain Catering, it was LLC was its official name, and I just put Green Mountain Catering at the top and left off LLC, that's not giving the full name unless I've already registered that as a DBA. Why? Because telling people that you're an LLC or telling people you're a corporation by using the name that includes that is the official way you put people on notice. So excellent question, and the answer is do that. Emily, I'm going to malign your profession for a moment here, because graphic designers often want to get rid of all that stuff. Because who wants LLC on the? And the answer is the lawyers does. Put it in there, and that's you bought the LLC to help provide liability protection. If people don't know it's the LLC, you just lost a lot of your liability protection. So it's a very key element in any of this.
So company letterhead, any identifying documents, all of those things should have LLC unless you've registered the DBA with the state, right?
And even then, it's probably a good idea to somewhere on there have the
In the
LLC.
footer, I would use LLC.
Yeah.
If you're signing contracts, or would you be putting the business name in instead of your own name?
And the answer is, do you think so? And the answer is yes, obviously. You're asking the question for exactly that reason. Yes, if it's a contract with the business, then it's got to be a contract with the business. There's a little convention, by the way, for how to sign that. You put the contract, says this contract is between Green Mountain Catering LLC, the business name, and whoever the client is. Secondly, in the signature line, there's a little convention that gets used. There's in all caps, Green Mountain Catering LLC, and then there's a signature line that says by at the beginning of that signature line. And underneath the signature line, it lists the name and the title. And that little convention says, I'm not doing this personally, I'm doing it on behalf of the company. And here's why I get to do it, because I'm the member or the manager or the president or whatever it is I am. That is my role in the company. Again, the same kind of thing that I said about that an action should be something that someone looking at it would understand. This, who's the contract with and who's signing it and on what behalf. That's something that wants to be just made clear. You know what? People say, yeah, but people get used to shorthanding and being informal and stuff. This is not where you do that.
That's great to know.
And I would add, so without being too obvious, obviously, if you're the owner of the company, you need that byline, because you're not going to sign Jolly Ice Cream, as the signature of the company. You're going to sign your name on behalf of the company, and that's a thing.
And I see there's a question in the chat about websites, about URLs. Those are typically not your corporate name. A URL is just an identifier. It's like a post office address. But the website that one gets to by going to the URL should have reasonably prominently the actual official name of the company, the LLC or corporate name.
And if I had a domain name for Jolly Ice Cream and it was jollyicecream.com, I certainly would want to be doing business as Jolly Ice Cream in my state so that I could be identified with the domain name I have, because I wouldn't want somebody else to come along and say they own that.
There's a whole additional hour we can spend on the intellectual property aspect, trademark, and getting names and figuring out whether they're good. I mean, checking them out. Not all trademarks are available. Many of the good ones have already been used. So never fall in love with a trade name for your company.
Before doing a web search.
Yeah, do a web search. You search on the USPTO.gov has a circumstance where you can search names. Just using it, just Googling is a good start. Who else is out there? What was your ice cream again?
Jolly good ice cream.
There we go. So jolly ice cream. Google it and see. And again, don't. Now the other thing, by the way, is that there's 27 different Jolly ice creams. That may actually be good because nobody can claim it then. So again, it's one of those circumstances where lawyer help can be significant in name changing and name selection and use.
In terms of the signature you mentioned, would you even want to include that in the signature of like your email correspondence?
Absolutely. I mean, put that signature block in the email. Put the formal stuff there. Some people say, "Oh, that's why it's formal, so that it's there and can be people know who they're dealing with and what the context.
And can you briefly say why people do that? Like, what is the, like,
Why
what-
they have the formal?
yeah,
Well, again, to go back to that whole question of who is being dealt with, one of the reasons to set up the legal entity is to have a liability shield, have a formal piece. The legal entity is the protection. It's an insurance policy, but it only works if people know what they're dealing with. And so telling people about it is part of the deal. Wouldn't be shy about it. Again, put the fancy logo, cool. Make sure that the signature block has the full name with the LLC or corp in it.
great, thank you.
Because that keeps your shield solid and doesn't put any holes in it, right?
Yeah. Because the worst case scenario is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody can prove you weren't operating as an LLC because you weren't doing these things, now you're opened up to personal liability.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I can
Right.
point to some cases in the law where exactly that's what happened, where people
They
got.
come for your car and your house to put it on a real basic level, right?
Yeah, the formality is part of the insurance. And the formality works best if the person who's asserting the formality has been careful about observing it. So that you know, again, I go back to that quote of the judge. If the business people couldn't be bothered with the formalities, why should we?
And because this is my standard piece in this, liability shields are important. That does not mean you shouldn't have business insurance. So do both, right?
And in fact, insurance folks can be a very useful resource if they're knowledgeable about liability, potential liability, and you know how to help with set up your office so slip and fall doesn't happen.
Thank you for mentioning that piece about the insurance. Other questions?
I think we certainly used up our immediate knowledge, and we'd be happy to share more and around some of these other issues. If folks have questions, again, sign up for a consult.
So
We'll do the educational piece on it and hopefully be helpful.
Rhonda just put a question in chat. Can you talk a little bit about what you should look for in insurance? Much like when you look for a lawyer, somebody you can work with should be your insurance agent, and then you talk to them about your business and what you're doing. General liability is first and foremost, but if you're in the service industry, like a graphics designer or a plumber or something like that, you're going to want to carry something called errors and omissions insurance, often referred to as E&O insurance. And both of those are worth their weight in gold. As far as helping you with this, and not in the least bit, not in the least bit, because what they do is they will make sure that if someone chooses to sue you, there's a lawyer on your side and the insurance company is paying for it. And it's not your headache.
And also be aware of what's sometimes called the exclusions that come with the coverage, because the exclusions are the little carve outs like, oh, this doesn't cover it if it occurred on Thursday. Well, you know, that's not what you want in your insurance, or this doesn't cover it.
You don't want to get hurricane insurance that excludes rain damage, for example.
There we go. Exactly. Yeah. So again, they're technical, they're picky. A good agent can chat you through in a way that helps to understand. And helps.
Again, word of mouth reputation means a lot here in Vermont. Is there a hold harmless clause in the insurance? That may be a question you have to actually take to a one-on-one consult, Rhonda. There are a lot of different aspects to that I'm not going to get into here.
Rhonda, you might find it useful. We had a workshop with an insurance agent, and you can find that recorded class on the CVOEO.org website. Just click on the Learn tab and find micro business, and you'll see the upcoming and previously recorded classes there.
Thank you.
That would answer some of your questions.
It's very helpful.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I would just really, again, like to sincerely thank Professors Goodenough and Eeks.
Ikes.
Ikes. I
There you
knew.
go.
Okay, I know. I'm sorry that I missed it the first
No
time.
worries.
I appreciate you correcting me. That's, I want to get it right. So thank you both very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And I'm so happy that this is recorded and can have a second life online. And the people who participated today, if you need to review things that were discussed earlier, of course, you'll have the recording. And I know Sophia will say a few words about what she's going to do next, but I would also be remiss if I didn't thank Sophia for all of her help with these classes and helping to coordinate and making sure everybody gets the links and information that they need to attend. So thank you, Sophia. I really appreciate all your
And